Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be discussing how to solve a percent mixture problem where we want to find two unknowns. So before we begin with this problem, let's actually begin with a background problem. So suppose I walk out to the parking lot and I spot that 30% of the cars are red. Suppose also I count and I find that 50 cars are in the parking lot. So notice what the percentage doesn't tell me. It really doesn't tell me how many of my cars are red. It just tells me the proportion that are red. But if I know there are 50 cars in the lot, how do I figure out how many of those 50 cars are red? Well, if I take the percentage and write it down as a decimal and I multiply that by the total number of cars, that's going to tell me how many of those cars are red. So if I take the percentage that are red and I multiply that by the total cars, that's going to give me the number of red cars. So we're going to use that idea actually in this problem. So suppose there are two types of juice drinks. The first type is 50% pure juice and the second is 75% pure juice. The company is attempting to produce a drink that is 70% pure fruit juice. How many pints of each type must be added to make 120 pints of the 70% pure fruit juice drink? So what I want you to notice is that this is really similar to the car situation. If I take the percentage of my juice that's pure fruit juice, and I multiply that by the number of pints of juice I have, remember that juice includes both the pure fruit juice as well as probably like water or some other substance. So if I take the percent that's pure fruit juice and I multiply by the total amount of juice I have, that's going to tell me how many of those pints are pure fruit juice. So that's going to give me pints of pure fruit juice. So in this problem, you'll notice that I actually have kind of like three different types of juices. They give me the initial one. It says the first type is 50% fruit juice and the second type is 75% pure fruit juice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to organize my information in a table. So the first one they mentioned was 50%, my 50% fruit juice mixture. My second one was 75%. And then the third one is more or less the combination of the first two. So I'm mixing the 50% and the 75% together to get the 70%. So this is going to be my 70%, and then in parentheses I'm going to put down, it's really my combined row because I'm combining those first two types of fruit juice. So now I'm just going to make a table out of my information. Well, if I fill in the first part of the table, if my juice is 50% fruit juice, well, the percentage that's fruit juice is 0.50, or if it's 50%, which has a decimal, is 0.50. The second one, 0.75. The third one, 0.70. How many pints of juice am I using? Well, if I go back to the original problem, I don't think they tell me much about this except for the last one. They tell me that I want to end up with 120 pints of the 70% fruit juice drink. So that one I'm going to call, or I can label as 120. The other ones, really what they're asking me for, it says, is how many pints of each type of juice must be added to make 120 pints. So what I'm looking for in this problem is how many pints of this juice and how many pints of this juice do I need to mix together in order to make the juice that I want. So this time I'm going to label the first one, since we don't know how many pints we're using, X, and I'm going to label the second one Y, because we're interested in finding both of them. So the other information, I think that's really it. I don't think there really is any other information. So let's see if we can come up with a couple of equations to solve. So the first one we've got, if I want to figure out just how many pints of pure fruit juice that I've got, well, I would take the percent that's pure fruit juice times and multiply that by the number of pints of that juice that I'm using. So in this case, it would be 0.50 times x. The second one would be 0.75 times y. And then the third one, I've got two numbers there, so I would just take my 70% times 120. And now here's what I know. Well, if we look at the pints of juice, I'm using 120 pints total, but that's really coming from the 50% juice and the 75% juice. So these two have to add together to be 120. Similarly, when I look at the pints of pure fruit juice, that pure fruit juice has to come either from the 50% juice or the 75% juice. So these two have to add together to equal this guy. So I've really got two equations and two variables. So I'm going to write those out. So let's just write out our two equations. So the first one is x plus y equals 120. And then we've got 0.50x plus 0.75y equals 0.70 times 120. So this is just a system of equations, and now if I want to solve the system, I could either use substitution or I could use elimination. I think in this case I'm going to use substitution. So I'm going to use the first equation to help me solve the second one. So what I'm going to do with the first one is I'm going to solve it for x. So if I do that, I'm just going to subtract y from both sides, which would give me x equals 120 minus y. And now what I can do is, now that I know another name for x, I'm going to take that 120 minus y, and I'm going to plug it in for x in the second equation. So if we do that, we get 0.50 times 120 minus y plus 0.75y equals, and then we've got 0.70 times 120. Okay, now if we just solve what's left, notice there's only y's. So we're going to solve this equation. 0.50 times 120 is 60, so I'm just distributing, minus 0.50y plus 0.75y, and then on the other side, 0.70 times 120 is 84. So then from there, let's combine like terms. So negative 0.50y plus 0.75y is 0.25y, and then plus 60 equals 84. Subtract 60 from both sides, and that gives us 0.25y equals 24. Divide by 0.25 on both sides, and that gives us y equals 96. But remember, that's really only half of our solution because we were interested in finding both x and y. So now that I know what y is, I'm going to go back up to this equation and plug my 96 in for y. So if we do that, we get x equals 120 minus 96. So again, I'm just plugging that 96 in for y up here. So 120 minus 96. And then if I subtract those out, I get x equals 24. So those are my two answers. And now what do those answers mean? Well, if I go back to my table, what x and y represented was x was the amount, the number of pints specifically, of the 50% juice, and the 96, or the y number, was the number of pints of the 75% juice that we were mixing together to make this 70% juice. And it should make sense that I'm using more of juice y, or excuse me, more of the 75% juice than I'm using of the 50% juice, because if you look at my combined solution, it's closer to the 75% than it is to the 50%. So we used 96 pints of the 75% juice and 24 pints of the 50% juice.